is that this book tells the story of blocking the building, preventing a huge 550 megawatt power plant from being built in the city of Southgate, in South Los Angeles, in the middle of LA's worst power crisis. If anybody was around here in 2001, you know the brownouts, the blackouts, and the conventional wisdom was that California needed more power. And there were all sorts of political efforts to greenlight power plants. South Los Angeles and Southgate in it is in the middle of Los Angeles' industrial belt. South LA has been the center of industry and the center of toxic industries and toxic dumping for quite some time in Los Angeles. It is now largely, it has long been a working class area. It is now a working class area that is largely Latino, largely but not exclusively newer immigrants, and combined with Chicanos whose families have been in the United States as long as the white folks. So it's a complex area. Now, the quickest way, I'm okay assuming that you know what environmental justice is as both a concept and a political movement. Is that okay? All right, I won't say there. In Los Angeles area, the disparity in access to toxics is that 91% of all of the people who live within 2 miles of a toxic dump or toxic industries are people of color. So there is really quite a disparity there. Now, I got into this story because I was watching television and I saw this incredibly telegenic demonstration of young high school kids with these gorgeous yellow and red and black posters protesting a power plant. And I thought, wow, this came on right after a clip about how we need more power. And I said, oh, these are wonderful, but there's no way in hell they're going to win. And then I began hearing more clips about things that were happening. And I went out to what turned out to be a concert that the young'uns had to celebrate, you know, this struggle. And I really got intrigued. And then I found out that there was a referendum held of people in Southgate, and people turned down the power plant 2-1. It was an advisory referendum, had no power, but nevertheless, that was a powerful statement. So I knew I wanted to write this story. And when I went to CBE, I told them that I wanted to write a story about how David beat Goliath, which is the way CBE phrased this struggle. Working class, folks of color, take on a power plant and win. How did this happen? And that was my story. Well, I started talking to people, and I realized that the story was much more complex, and it was full of interesting contradictions. Folks who had been the usual allies were on opposite sides of the story. That is, environmental justice folks worked very closely with labor against polluting corporations. In this case, the polluting corporation and labor were working very closely together to support the power plant. County Fed, SEIU, Public Employees Union, building trades were all in favor of the power plant. Power plant owner didn't sound like a corporate Goliath. He said he was a green, dedicated green guy, had promised union jobs, union hire, promised good things to the town. Okay, so there's something, that was one set of stories. Second set of stories that turned up is that one of the powerful forces in local politics who was opposed to the power plant turned out to be a very crooked city politician, the treasurer, Albert Robles. Maybe we should...
Yeah, I'll go ahead.
So Robles was a very strange person to be.
What was wrong with it again?
He was the city treasurer, and he was a crook. He's in the federal pen right now. But he's gonna get out soon.
He's a UCLA alumni.
Yes, he is. So I realized that to tell this story, to tell even the environmental justice story, I had to tell 3 stories. I had to tell the community environmental justice story, about which Alvaro has written. I had to tell the story of this corporation and its allies, and I'm going to call it the Son-Law story because that's the name of the corporation that was going to build the plan. And I had to tell the Albert Robles anti-corruption story. And I thought, I thought of this project as a Rashomon project, but where do you all know the Japanese film Rashomon? It's probably ancient. It's a story, I think, of a murder, and it's told from 3 points of view. And the idea is to learn the truth. I had a different agenda. It wasn't to learn the truth of what happened, because that aspect was there. What I wanted to learn was what each of these points of view could tell us about what was my real agenda. What does it take to build a robust environmental movement that has a powerful moral and an effective political strategy? So that was the big question. Okay, so what I'm going to do is take you through each of these stories in a very brief way and suggest what the problems and issues each one raised and how they enrich the story. Okay, so the first story is the environmental justice story, and this is environmental justice activists and high school students, David Lee, a corporate Goliath, who had not only backing of the county Fed and labor, but also had backing of some very popular local Southgate and regional politicians and the Latino political caucus in the California legislature. So how did David win? I found that I agreed with most of CBE's internal assessment and with Alvaro's article on the campaign. And there were 2 key things here. One, the message of environmental justice resonated very powerfully with Southgate residents. Old and new Latino residents were working class, they knew xenophobia, they knew racism existed. This was not that long after California's Prop 187 campaign. They had also been involved, many of them, in fighting toxic spills. There were a couple near elementary schools that parents had to take on. In one case they won. In another case, I think it took quite a while before they were able to have the elementary school relocated, but they were never able to cap that dump. So when environmental justice says we're special because they think that they can get away with locating toxic dumps in our community, because we are people of color and because they believe we cannot and will not fight back, that message was heard loud and clear. It was a no-brainer. For many of the high school students who got involved in the campaign, they described it as, oh, this is a phrase I was waiting to hear. I knew something was rotten, but I didn't know how or why. So it was an easy sell. It put a name to a concept, but it also linked them to a larger moral movement. That they were right. There is something immoral about these practices. The second thing is that CBE and Youth for Environmental Justice waged an incredibly powerful grassroots campaign. They built leadership among high school students. They incorporated teachers. They had a very savvy media campaign.